Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a project to share with you today. We are inspired by this book called Autumn, and it has poems and songs and stories that are fall themed for autumn. And there is this story called The Giant Turnip, and we thought that we would go ahead and create the little props for this story. So I have a really large turnip that I recently felted. And then I thought maybe I would make like a set of smaller ones that can go along with our little peg dolls. And so I am creating some peg dolls to go along with the story. Now the story is a Russian folktale, and it has a grandfather, a grandmother, a child, a dog, a cat, and a mouse, I believe. So we're going to alter the story a little bit since I don't have the animals as wooden pieces. So we're going to have a grandfather, a grandmother, maybe a mom and a dad, and then maybe two children instead. So for the first time, I'm going to be trying out these peg dolls. These are at achildsdream.com, and they are really fantastic. They're wood like the peg dolls. They are taller, at least some of them are. Here's one that's smaller and one that's even smaller than that. And they have one like this that has a finger hole, so it can be like a finger puppet. And they have one that looks like a little gnome. You can see that right there. So they are a little bit more challenging to work with, at least for me. I've only just gotten started with them, but they look fantastic in the end, and I especially need to use these ones because unlike the peg dolls and the finger puppets, these ones have arms, and I really needed that for this particular story. So I want to show you really quickly the dad that we made. I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. However, it took forever to do, so hopefully my second attempt at making now the grandfather will go a little bit quicker. He looks a little bit more like a Western guy rather than what I was trying to make him look like. But anyway, he's got a beard, he's got some hair. I stitched him a little jacket, and you can see that the arms can move, and that's kind of cool. That's the only peg dolls that I know of that can do that, so that's kind of neat. All right, so we are going to work on the grandfather. This is what it looks like before before you put anything on it, and it has this cone shape that kind of looks like the girl peg dolls, but you can see here that you can't really see that it is cone shaped. With the clothing, it looks like it could be a man pretty easily. So it also comes with the what do you call these? Pipe cleaners. Yeah, it comes with the pipe cleaners, and then you put it comes with these little wood beads that have a hole on them, and they slip on right on the end, and that's it. I would recommend gluing these in place, and these are all chokeable items, so be really careful if you've got young children. Okay, so I am going to get started with this one, and hopefully we can make a grandfather. So I'm not quite sure which felt to choose. I do know that I want the whole set to have grays and browns and a little bit of green, so they kind of all coordinate. So I've settled on this dark gray felt. This is Holland felt. It's 100% wool, and you can find this product as well as all the other materials that I'm using for today's project at achildsdream.com, and that information is in the description box below. So I used the base of the peg doll to kind of measure off how much I want to do. Now, since this is the second peg doll I'm making, I kind of have an idea of how to do the pants. Now, it kind of came about by accident with my first peg doll, and that's that I ended up accidentally having the seam in the front where I really wanted the seam in the back. Now, if the seam were in the back, and you can kind of see it right now, it would probably look more like a skirt in the front. So it's actually a good idea to have your seam in the front, because then it looks more like a pair of pants. And then I took those extra pieces there and kind of turned them into flaps to make them kind of look like pockets. And this kind of just came about by accident, by trial and error, and I really like the way it looks. And so then moving forward for the other male peg dolls, this is what I did. Now I want to do a shirt, and I kind of just measured off how much I need. And again, I want this to be pretty precise because I don't want a lot of extra felt causing ripples or just being too bulky, because it's really going to show now that I already have the pants in place. Now I went ahead and did little notches where the armholes are supposed to be. I have my paper piercer there, and I use that just to kind of give the initial hole, and then after that I just use my scissors. So now I want to kind of get this in place, and even though I measured it off, I don't have enough, but that's okay. It's going to be in the back, and there's going to be a jacket over it, so it's not going to matter. One thing that you probably should be mindful of is not making the top of the shirt all snug and tucked in. The fact that it's a little bit more open and kind of baggy towards the top makes it look more manly. It makes it look more like shoulders and just a different shape than the cone shape that is the peg doll. These are different peg dolls than the ones that you mostly find online. These ones are cone shaped. They have armholes. It's a very nice wood. It's nice and polished. It has kind of a sheen to it, which I suspect would probably make them a little bit harder to paint if you're using a watercolor based paint. But these work so well for adding felt to them and just really getting creative with them. I really like them, even though as my first set, they were a little bit more challenging to make versus the other finger puppets and peg dolls that I make. So with a little effort, I got that pipe cleaner in. I probably should have put it in before I glued everything in place, but I had those armholes cut out, so it was okay. So I added some buttons just using some beads, but in the future, I would recommend that you sew them on rather than gluing them on because they start to fall off immediately. I also kind of made my own pattern here for the shirt, and it was a little bit small. So to make a little jacket or a shirt, it's pretty simple. You can imagine it sort of like a bulky T shape, and then to make the jacket in the front, you just cut that piece in half. So it's the same front and back. You just need to cut the front piece in the front in order to just give it those flaps to open up. I think you know what I mean. So now it's time to stitch the whole thing together. This is one of the lengthier processes of making this peg doll. I am using a blanket stitch all around. You don't need to go and do quite so much detail. You could do a more simple stitch. You could even just use some hot glue, but I really, really like the way that it turned out. I like the blanket stitch. I like the contrast of the color of the embroidery thread and the felt. So overall, I'm really, really pleased with the way that this peg doll turned out. However, at the end, you will notice that a lot of the details that I added to this peg doll are lost underneath the grandfather's beard, but that's okay. They're still there. We know that they're there, and we just kind of like those details. So I'm going to go ahead and glue his jacket shut, and you can see that I'm kind of struggling there to get it to go across because I did make it a little bit small. Now, it's not the worst thing that's a little bit small. Because it's small, it does fit a little bit more snug, and it still exposes the front part of his outfit. So I kind of like that look as well. So you can kind of go with both. And the thing is that when you encounter kind of a challenge or a mistake, you can kind of just work with it, and sometimes those mistakes end up being the best thing. So even though that jacket was a little bit small, I kind of like the way it looks even better than one of the peg dolls that follows this one, where I am mindful of the size of the jacket and I make it larger. It ends up not looking quite as nice. And then again with the pants, like that was a mistake to begin with, and then it ends up being like a great idea, and I use it for every peg doll that follows. Now I'm not using any pattern for this. I did make my own pattern for the jacket, but there are some available online. So if you don't feel confident about making your own or just kind of winging it, then I would recommend looking for some of those patterns. Now I went ahead and gave him eyes and kind of a mouth because I felt like he needed it with the beard, but it turns out that the rest of the ones that we make for this series don't have faces, and my children prefer them without faces, so you can do either, and I just used a pencil. I thought it was pretty easy. Now, I'm not crazy about the way that his hair looks. It looks a little bit more like a turban, and I just kind of want it to look like old hair. Anyway, elderly hair. So I fussed with it a little bit, but it is going to stay the way it is, and I do add a little bit more to his beard. I love his beard. I love that. I just love it. It does cover some of those details, but look how awesome he looks. My kids love him. I love him. I love the story. I am so pleased with the way that these peg dolls turned out. I had these in my collection for almost a year before I finally, tried working with them. They were a little bit intimidating at first, but now that we've done a few, I am super excited about them, and we are definitely ordering more. So if you want to see the rest of the tutorials in this series, you can tap on the screen right now. It also includes some other videos that you might like about our peg dolls and finger puppets. And if you want to see what we're up to on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.